Imagine being reincarnated as the most overpowered demon in the world, where even taking over the world loses its charm simply because of how easy it would be for you. What could possibly excite someone who can obtain everything so effortlessly? The answer is simple: a journey to earn true love through trial and error. This is the story of Yoki and the struggles he faces as he navigates his love life. But before getting into the video, please consider subscribing, as only a very small percentage of viewers are subscribed. It's free, and it really helps with motivation. Without further ado, let's get into it. The story opens with four valiant adventurers standing firm before the ominous castle of the Demon King. Their voices reportedly carry a slight tremor, though it is overwhelmed by their resolve to defeat the tyrant who has terrorized humanity for years. The party's leader, sensing the tension, delivers a brief yet stirring speech that successfully boosts morale and convinces everyone that charging headfirst into certain danger is, in fact, a fantastic idea. Upon entering the palace, the heroes are soon stopped by a boyish-looking demon who calmly announces that the only way forward is through him. One of the party members immediately launches a fire spell, clearly hoping for a quick victory. Unfortunately, the demon blocks it reflexively, as if swatting away an annoying mosquito. Another hero rushes in for close combat, sword in hand, but even that proves completely ineffective. Finally, the leader unleashes his prized weapon, Excalibur, only to discover that it does not even begin to match the demon's overwhelming power. The battle ends swiftly, with the hero's party collapsing unconscious, while the demon remains entirely unbothered and, frankly, not even winded. As they lie defeated, the demon's attention is drawn to Cecilia for the first time. The sight of her reportedly raises his eyebrows and delivers an unexpected ache to his heart. Before he can process these unfamiliar emotions, his allies arrive and ask whether the human should be executed. The demon refuses and orders the heroes to be discarded near a nearby village instead. As they are carried away, he silently bids Cecilia farewell, despite never having spoken a word to her. A month later, the demon, now revealed to be named Yoki, is summoned before the Demon King. He reports that the heroes' party continues attempting to infiltrate the castle and continues failing just as consistently. The Demon King questions why the heroes are still alive, given how thoroughly they've been defeated. Yoki responds that murdering such insignificant humans is not worth his time, a reply that aligns perfectly with demonic arrogance, while conveniently concealing his lingering feelings for Cecilia. The Demon King, however, finds this explanation unacceptable and orders Yoki to execute the heroes the next time they appear. Yoki leaves the chamber pale and conflicted, though he hides it well enough to survive the walkout. That night, Yoki reportedly sleeps poorly, his thoughts looping endlessly like a cursed morning alarm. Before long, the heroes return once again. Yoki fights as he always does, effortlessly and without concern, while the heroes exhaust themselves in a series of increasingly desperate attacks. Eventually, Yoki makes an offer that shocks everyone. He will allow them to pass if Cecilia agrees to stay with him. The proposal stuns the entire party. One member even suggests that it might not be the worst deal, though the leader firmly refuses to sacrifice a teammate so shamelessly. In the end, Cecilia herself agrees, reasoning that Yoki has already spared them multiple times. Trusting this logic, the remaining heroes leave, abandoning Cecilia alone with the demon. Unsure what to do and determined not to go quietly, Cecilia launches an attack at Yoki. As expected, it accomplishes absolutely nothing. Yoki then gathers all his strength to release a powerful attack of his own, one that shocks Cecilia, but leaves Yoki completely paralyzed. In that vulnerable moment, he confesses his feelings. Cecilia responds by casting a spell of rejection, effectively draining him of both ambition and dignity. After mobilizing him, Cecilia grows curious and asks how a demon could possess a heart at all, and why someone so gentle does not use his power for good. Yoki explains that he was once human in another world, and was reborn as a demon, forced to obey the Demon King. Killing the Demon King would only result in Yoki becoming the next one, trapping him in the same cycle. Cecilia begins to understand his predicament, and sympathy blossoms into something warmer. She offers him her hand and invites him to join her in the human world, insisting that there is good within him. The following day, the heroes return to the Kingdom of Clarinus in triumph, celebrated for defeating the Demon King and ending the war. The king declares a 3-day holiday, ensuring that future generations will also enjoy mandatory festivities. Meanwhile, Yoki arrives in the same town, carefully hiding his horns and wings. Starting a new life as a human, he immediately faces the pressing concern of funding said life. He registers as an adventurer at the lowest rank and, driven by ambition and affection for Cecilia, climbs to D rank within a week, quickly becoming the talk of the town. This news eventually reaches Cecilia, who finds Yoki and brings him to her mansion. She explains that while the Demon King is gone, humanity has become its own greatest threat, as kingdoms now scramble for power. The hero's leader has already received multiple marriage proposals, all thinly veiled political maneuvers. Cecilia's main concern, however, is Yoki, She fears his powers could be exploited and asks him to leave the Adventurers Guild. Yoki reassures her that he has no intention of using his strength for evil, easing her worries. Their conversation is abruptly interrupted when Cecilia's mother enters and immediately begins discussing marriage proposals. This does not sit well with Yoki, whose disappointment is instantly noticed. Her mother, perceptive and direct, asks him outright whether he intends to marry Cecilia. Yoki admits that he has already been rejected and insists that Cecilia's feelings matter more than his own. This answer impresses her mother, who values character as much as success. The episode concludes with Yoki asking for permission to call Cecilia by her name, a small step forward, but a significant one for a former demon experiencing love for the first time. The episode opens with Yoki locked in what is technically a life-or-death battle, though the danger is mostly theoretical. His opponents consist of an extremely aggressive monster resembling an oversized rooster, deadly in reputation, ridiculous in appearance, and its equally hostile partner, a massive snake. Despite the ominous pairing, Yoki handles the situation with insulting ease. He reportedly dodges their attacks with his hands tied behind his back and a broad smile on his face, as though this were little more than a casual weekend workout. In his mind, this adventure request is still far less demanding than his former job as a royal servant to the Demon Lord. Before long, he defeats both monsters effortlessly, thus completing the quest. He recalls how the Adventurers Guild had warned him that the task would take weeks and test his limits. Instead, Yoki locates the monsters and eliminates them in less than a single day, quietly wondering whether the guild enjoys exaggeration as a hobby. His moment of satisfaction is short-lived. Completely off guard, he is suddenly attacked by 3 demons. His instincts nullify their assault almost instantly, and upon closer inspection, recognition sets in. These attackers turn out to be members of his former team from the Demon King's dungeon. Duke the Dullahan, Happiness the Harpy, and Sheik the Pixie. They explain that they've been desperately searching for him ever since his mysterious disappearance following the Demon King's defeat. One might expect Yoki to fabricate a convenient excuse about his current life among humans. Instead, he chooses honesty. He openly explains that he confessed his love to a member of the hero's party, only to be rejected. Rather than retreating into bitterness, he decided to live as a human, earn a living, and someday confess his feelings to Cecilia again, hoping she might change her heart. He encourages his former teammates to do the same, to live freely, unbound by their identities as demons. With no demon king left to command them, he insists they are finally free to choose their own paths without shame or pressure. Yoki expects them to part ways. To his surprise, the opposite happens. His former teammates reveal that they have become deeply dependent on him and are now determined to follow him, specifically to meet the woman who rejected their overwhelmingly powerful captain. Yoki is stunned and attempts to dissuade them, pointing out that blending in with humans while in disguise will be extremely difficult. This argument fails immediately. They counter that if Yoki can disguise himself, then so can they. Outvoted and outmatched, Yoki reluctantly agrees. In an attempt to make them less conspicuous, he cuts off the wings of Happiness and Sheik and tells Duke to keep his head firmly attached to his neck instead of carrying it around like a decorative accessory. The process of wing removal is described as anything but pleasant. When they finally meet Cecilia, Happiness immediately leaps into her lap, like an injured puppy seeking comfort. Cecilia, far from amused, becomes furious with Yoki. While she understands the importance of disguises, she makes it very clear that mutilating someone's wings in such a barbaric manner is unacceptable. Seeing Cecilia genuinely angry with him for the first time sends Yoki into a panic, and he apologizes repeatedly and desperately until her mood softens. Among the demons, Duke the Dullahan proves to be the most composed. He joins Yoki and Cecilia for tea and recounts his past. He explains that he was once a ruthless demon until he was assigned to eliminate Yoki. At the Demon Palace, Yoki was infamous for isolating himself and disregarding orders, which eventually led one superior to hire Duke to knock some sense into him. The attempt failed spectacularly. Yoki defeated Duke with ease, and from that moment on, Duke acknowledged him as his captain and pledged unwavering loyalty. At some point, they realize that Happiness and Sheik are nowhere to be found. A search begins. Sheik is discovered first, inexplicably asleep in the lap of Cecilia's mother like a contented pet. Cecilia's mother cheerfully explains that she encountered the boy running through the garden, found him adorable, and decided to indulge him. He eventually tired himself out and fell asleep. Yoki cautiously asks whether a girl had been with the boy. Cecilia's mother confirms this and mentions that Sophia brought her into the mansion. Alarmed, Yoki and Cecilia rush inside and discover Happiness dressed as a maid. Sophia apologizes profusely, explaining that she mistook Happiness for an applicant filling a newly open maid position. Once the misunderstanding is resolved, Sophia tells Happiness she is free to leave. To everyone's surprise, Happiness refuses. She announces that she wants to work as a maid and see where life takes her. Sophia agrees and escorts her to her new room. As the day ends, Cecilia's mother privately approaches Yoki and confides that Cecilia has been exhausted from work lately. She suggests that Yoki take her out the next day for a change of pace. Yoki, already hopelessly in love, agrees immediately, perhaps a bit too enthusiastically. The following day, Yoki waits at their meeting spot, quietly marveling at the fact that he is about to go on what is essentially a parent-approved date. One could argue that he impressed Cecilia's mother before he managed to impress Cecilia herself. When Cecilia arrives, Yoki is stunned. Instead of her usual attire, she wears a beautiful white dress paired with glasses, serving both as fashion and disguise. Fame, it seems, has its inconveniences. Their date begins at a cake shop, followed by a brief stop to Animerecap that instantly captures Cecilia's attention. They then go clothes shopping, during which Yoki spends most of his time blushing uncontrollably as he watches Cecilia try on different outfits, wondering how one person can be that mesmerizing. As with all good things, the date is interrupted. They run into Yuga and Mikana. Yuga, who is also deeply infatuated with Cecilia, finds her immediately captivating. He stares at Yoki, sensing that he has met him before, completely unaware that the demon he was never able to defeat is standing right in front of him. The group enters an accessory shop together. Yoki selects a modest, cute necklace for Cecilia, which she genuinely loves. Attempting to outdo him, Yuga chooses the most expensive necklace in the store. Rather than being impressed, Cecilia is overwhelmed by its sheer size. In his haste to have her try it on, Yuga accidentally ruins her disguise, drawing public attention. Fans swarm the heroes, leaving Yoki separated and forgotten in the chaos. While wandering alone, Yoki encounters Raven, the swordsman hero, who is also being mobbed by admirers. Yoki helps him escape, and the two strike up a conversation. Yoki notices that Raven has a surprisingly feminine voice. Raven admits this is his greatest insecurity, and that people often mock him for it. Yoki, however, accepts him without judgment, remarking that everyone has something they hide or feel ashamed of. Privately, he reflects that in his case, it happens to be the fact that he is a demon in disguise. After parting ways with Raven, Yoki eventually reunites with Cecilia. Together, they conclude the day by helping a lost child find his mother. A quiet, simple ending to an eventful day that proves even demons in disguise can stumble into something resembling normal happiness. The following day, Yoki is shaken when his mother informs him that Cecilia fainted after spending the previous day with him. He immediately assumes full responsibility, blaming himself for failing to maintain her disguise and allowing the situation to spiral out of control. Cecilia's mother, however, firmly dismisses his self-reproach. She makes it clear that the real culprit is the hero Yuga, whose carelessness exposed Cecilia to the public. As a result, Cecilia was overwhelmed by crowds, pushed beyond her limits, and left physically exhausted. Matters only worsen when Yuga has the audacity to visit the mansion afterward, claiming he wants to take care of Cecilia despite having caused chaos in the first place. Her mother finds his behavior entirely unacceptable and promptly orders Sophia to escort him out of the mansion without ceremony. Afterward, she allows Yoki to visit Cecilia. He approaches her bedside filled with guilt, feeling deeply ashamed. In reported reflection, he admits that he believed he failed to make her day enjoyable and apologizes sincerely for disappointing her. At this point, Cecilia begins to open up to him, adopting a noticeably sunder attitude. She tells him that while it is indeed his fault that things went wrong, that only means he now has to make up for it. She insists that he take her out again, and demands that this time the day goes smoothly from start to finish. This declaration sends Yoki's heart soaring. In his mind, it is nothing less than official permission for a second date, granted directly by Cecilia herself. Overwhelmed with enthusiasm, he eagerly agrees and vows to be far more careful and responsible next time. Leaving the mansion in an unusually pleasant mood, Yoki encounters Raven once again. Despite having only recently become friends, Raven decides to confide in him. He admits that there is someone he loves deeply, but that he struggles to gather the courage to confess his feelings. Yoki responds by reminding Raven of who he is, tall, handsome, and one of the swordsmen who defeated the Demon King. In Yoki's view, a man like that has nothing to fear. These words give Raven the confidence he needs, and he declares his intention to face his feelings head-on before heading off. Yoki watches as Raven walks straight towards Cecilia's mansion. In an instant, Yoki's cheerful mood collapses. His optimism plummets into despair as a terrifying realization dawns on him. His worst fear appears to have come true. Raven, too, has fallen for Cecilia, and is now on his way to confess to her. The third episode opens with Raven making his way towards Cecilia's residence, while the realization slowly and cruelly dawns on Yoki that the girl Raven intends to confess to is none other than Cecilia herself. Raven even remarks that the girl he likes did not laugh at his voice the first time she heard it, a detail that perfectly matches Cecilia's gentle and kind nature. Yoki spirals into a panic unlike anything he has ever experienced before. His mind races with the terrifying possibility that Raven might confess, and that Cecilia might accept his feelings. After all, the two of them had once been members of the same party. Yoki's imagination runs wild, painting vivid scenes of shared battles and quiet moments. He envisions countless occasions where Cecilia must have been in danger while fighting demons, only for Raven to arrive just in time to save her, their bond deepening little by little with each encounter. His anxiety reaches its peak, until Raven suddenly returns from Cecilia's mansion, utterly dejected and muttering that he should just die. The dramatic despair both intrigues and strangely reassures Yoki. Clearly, something had gone terribly wrong. However, Raven is in no state to explain himself, refusing to speak about what happened. Determined to uncover the truth, Yoki decides to return to the mansion and speak to Cecilia directly about her conversation with Raven. Instead, he is met at the door by Sophia, who has sealed the entrance shut with heavy chains. Chains strong enough, she claims, to restrain even the Demon King himself. In a firm and unyielding tone, Sophia explains that Cecilia desperately needs rest and cannot be disturbed by any form of social interaction for the time being. Summoning his courage, Yoki brings up Raven's recent visit. To his shock, Sophia responds that Raven had not come to see Cecilia at all. He had only asked to meet Happiness. The revelation hits Yoki like a thunderbolt. Could it be that the girl Raven wanted to confess to was Happiness instead? With this new information weighing heavily on his mind, Yoki seeks out Happiness herself. From their conversation, he finally learns the truth. Raven's confession had been met with a single, devastating word: impossible. Yoki understands that Raven is a fundamentally good person, even if he was once an enemy. Because of this, he makes a sincere effort to persuade his former teammate, Happiness, to reconsider Raven's confession. After speaking with her, it becomes painfully obvious to Yoki that Happiness does, in fact, harbor feelings for Raven. However, her shyness prevents her from acknowledging them openly, and she is far too timid to say yes to his confession. Armed with this new insight, Yoki gathers the remaining members of their former team to discuss Happiness's love life. Duke immediately objects to the idea of Happiness being romantically involved with a human. In his view, humans are largely untrustworthy, and he cannot imagine Happiness wanting anything to do with one. He reminds everyone that Happiness is a harpy, a race that humans have attempted to enslave for centuries due to their beauty and feathers. There is no guarantee, he argues, that Raven is any different from those who cause her suffering. Duke reasons that such experiences likely shaped Happiness from childhood, instilling a deep resentment toward humans. Sheik, however, disagrees. He argues that humans, like any other race, are capable of both good and evil. Raven, in his opinion, clearly belongs to the former category, having once been a member of the hero's party. The discussion ultimately ends without a firm conclusion, leaving Yoki no closer to a solution. Needing a distraction, Yoki heads to the Adventurers Guild to earn some quick money through easy quests. Upon arrival, he discovers that the receptionist who usually assigns his work is absent. Another receptionist informs him that Kramen has been injured and hospitalized. To Yoki's surprise, he also learns that Kramen is actually the vice president of the guild. Concerned, Yoki visits the hospital, bringing fruit to wish Kramen a swift recovery. Although Kramen is typically irritated by Yoki's presence at the guild, he is genuinely grateful for the visit. He then explains how he ended up hospitalized. Contrary to what one might expect, it was neither a monster nor a brawl with another adventurer that caused his injuries. It was his wife. Kramen reveals that he had attempted to buy the perfect necklace for their anniversary, but took so long choosing that the shop closed before he could decide. Worse still, he returned home late, leading his wife to believe he had forgotten the anniversary entirely. The misunderstanding resulted in severe consequences and a very thorough beating. Yoki offers to heal him with magic, but Kramen refuses. He explains that this is his chance to be doted on by his wife, and he has no intention of ruining it. Shortly afterward, Kramen's wife arrives, revealing herself to be none other than Sophia, the head maid of Cecilia's household. The revelation explains the severity of Kramen's injuries all too well. Sophia later pulls Yoki aside to thank him for visiting her husband. Witnessing this entire ordeal, Yoki comes to an important realization about the value of thoughtful gifts. Inspired, he sets out to find Raven, forming a plan that might help both himself and Raven impress the women they care about. Along the way, his thoughts drift, and he begins to fantasize about his own future, blushing at the possibilities. When Yoki finally reaches Raven's room, he finds him on the verge of emotional collapse, devastated by his first rejection. Raven recounts how he first met Happiness during a routine patrol. He had encountered 3 thugs harassing her and intervened out of duty, defeating one while the others fled after recognizing him as a hero. As he prepared to leave, Happiness grabbed his arm to thank him. In his surprise, Raven accidentally revealed his high-pitched voice and felt deeply embarrassed. Instead of mocking him, Happiness praised it, calling it beautiful. That moment, Raven admits, was when he fell in love with her. Listening carefully, Yoki rekindles hope within the broken warrior. He assures Raven that Happiness does like him, and that it is far too early to give up. According to Yoki, the best course of action is to give her a gift, something that could shift her feelings and open the door again. Encouraged, Raven regains his confidence. and together they head to an accessory shop. Yoki buys a present for Cecilia, while Raven carefully selects the perfect gift for happiness. Just as they are about to leave, they run into Mikana, a notoriously blunt member of the hero's party. She is surprised to see the two men in a gift shop, prompting Yoki to hastily clarify that they are shopping for women they love, not for each other. Mikana is shocked to learn that Raven has a love interest and insists on hearing the entire story. Yoki immediately realizes his mistake. Knowing Raven would prefer to keep this private, refusing to let them escape, Mikana drags them to a nearby cafe. Raven and Yoki attempt to deflect her questions by focusing on their food, but Mikana manages to coax Yoki into talking by promising to share information about Cecilia. Unable to resist, Yoki gives in. The conversation soon shifts to Mikana's own love life. She openly admits that she is deeply in love with the hero Yuga, who, unfortunately, remains fixated on Cecilia despite being rejected multiple times. Mikana explains that Cecilia dislikes Yuga's careless behavior around women, particularly his habit of barging into the girls' bath, despite clearly not being her type. Yuga stubbornly refuses to accept the truth. Mikana then recounts the final battle with the Demon King, revealing that their strategy involved leaving Cecilia alone with a demon they could not defeat. Yoki struggles to maintain a neutral expression, knowing that the demon in question was actually himself, something none of them realize. Yuga, Mikana adds, still blames her for influencing that decision, and their relationship has never been the same since. Feeling responsible for reopening old wounds, Yoki comforts Mikana, reminding her that her actions were motivated by concern for Yuga and the pressure placed upon him as a hero. With time running out, everyone depended on him to save the world. His words restore Mikana's spirits, and she leaves the cafe with renewed hope. Finally, Yoki and Raven make their way to Cecilia's home, where Raven intends to speak with Happiness once more. Duke intercepts them, behaving like an overprotective older brother and subjecting Raven to one final trial. Raven passes without issue and is allowed through. Standing before Happiness, he presents her with a gift and asks if they can at least remain friends. Happiness accepts both the present and the proposal, bringing the long and turbulent day to a hopeful close. The anime opens with Sheik attempting to rouse Yoki from his bed, only to realize that Yoki is not truly asleep, but lost in quiet despair. At this point, Yoki has not seen Cecilia for over a week, and the absence weighs heavily on him. Sophia later explains that Cecilia has been exceptionally busy and therefore unable to receive any visitors. In fact, she is rarely present at her palace at all, as she travels across the world healing those who have fallen victim to catastrophes or dangerous threats. The rest of the hero's party is similarly occupied. Raven now serves as a captain of the knights, a role that binds him to numerous duties in service of the crown. Yuga, the leader of the hero's party, is frequently tied up with diplomatic responsibilities and spends much of his time suppressing monsters across various regions. Mikana, as a palace mage, also bears a profession rife with constant challenges and obligations. Although Yoki recognizes how remarkable they all are, he cannot help but feel sorrow for them, knowing how little time they have left to spend together. Yoki quietly reflects that this separation is partly his own doing. With the Demon King defeated, the journey that bound them together came to an end, and each of them went their separate ways. Sheik remarks that things might have felt livelier if Duke were still around, but even he had been recruited by the knights and was now perpetually busy. Not long after, Happy suddenly bursts into the room, breaking the somber mood. She excitedly informs Yoki that Cecilia will be at her home later that day and that he is free to visit her. The news sends Yoki's spirits soaring. At last, he will have a chance to see Cecilia again and to give her the necklace he had bought just for her. Later that day, Yoki finds himself in unusually high spirits, his thoughts consumed by how wonderful it will be to finally reunite with his lover, Cecilia. Even so, the afternoon still stretches ahead of him, and he wonders how best to pass the time before their meeting. As he strolls down the street, he encounters an oracle who ominously declares that he is fated to suffer terrible luck that day. Yoki dismisses the warning outright, scoffing at what he assumes is nothing more than a scam. After all, this is the day he is finally seeing Cecilia again, which alone, in his mind, proves the oracle wrong. Unfortunately for Yoki, it does not take long for him to realize that the oracle knew exactly what she was talking about. His misfortune begins when he stops by a bakery he often visited with Cecilia. Hoping to buy muffins from the bright and kind young woman, who usually works the counter, he instead finds himself greeted by a muscular man filling in for her that day. Although the man is cheerful, the contrast between his sunny demeanor and his imposing physique strikes Yoki as unsettling. Any hope of enjoying pleasant, familiar customer service quickly fades. Matters only worsen when Yoki steps outside and discovers that his muffins have been crushed during packing, an especially bitter disappointment given the bakery's normally excellent service. Still, after tasting them, he concedes that they remain delicious, which softens the blow somewhat. No sooner does he recover from that annoyance than he collides with a passerby who responds with a chilling death stare. Panicked, Yoki immediately apologizes, his quick thinking and frantic politeness sparing him from what feels like a very real threat. Moments later, a child runs straight into him. Although Yoki manages to catch the child before he falls, his own snack is knocked to the ground and ruined beyond saving. True to his kind nature, Yoki buys the child a replacement without hesitation, as if the day has not already tested him enough. Fate deals him another cruel hand when a pickpocket steals his wallet and bolts. Drawing on his demonic powers, Yoki swiftly gives chase and recovers his hard-earned money. However, his relief is short-lived. Yuga happens to catch a glimpse of the confrontation and, misunderstanding the situation entirely, assumes that Yoki is the thief. Unaccustomed to careful reasoning, Yuga charges in and attacks without hesitation. Yoki manages to evade several blows, but because he must keep his demonic powers hidden, he is ultimately overwhelmed. The encounter ends with Yoki being arrested and thrown into prison, the final and cruelest confirmation that the Oracle's prophecy has come true. Duke later visits Yoki in his cell, explaining that, now that he is a knight, he has been allowed to see him. He reassures Yoki not to worry, adding that Raven is doing everything in his power to resolve the situation. Before long, Yoki's name is cleared. To atone for his reckless misjudgment, Yuga treats Yoki to a grand meal, with Raven joining them. During the gathering, Yuga gradually realizes that Yoki is the same person he had seen accompanying Cecilia the last time they crossed paths. Curious, he presses Yoki to explain the nature of his relationship with her. Yoki avoids revealing the truth about his feelings, and instead claims that he is simply a close friend to Cecilia. Yuga then voices a question that has been troubling him for quite some time: how he can make Cecilia stop hating him. Yoki responds cautiously, admitting that he is still relatively new to Cecilia's life, and suggesting that someone like Mikana, who has known her far longer, will be better suited to answer that question. Yuga immediately rejects the idea, insisting that Mikana is the last person he should ask. He goes on to confess his belief that Mikana might secretly harbor resentment towards Cecilia. To justify this, Yuga recounts a painful memory from the past. He describes a demon their party had been unable to defeat, one who offered to let them escape on the condition that Cecilia remain behind. Yuga places the blame for that decision squarely on Mikana, claiming that her persuasive insistence had led the group to abandon Cecilia. Yoki firmly disagrees. He reminds Yuga that, in the end, the responsibility lay with him as the leader. While Mikana may have voiced a terrible suggestion, it was Yuga who chose to act on it rather than reject it outright. Leadership, Yoki argues, means bearing the weight of such decisions. He further points out that Mikana does not hate Cecilia at all. On the contrary, she regrets making that suggestion more than anything else. Yoki recalls how Mikana had once broken down in tears while recounting the incident, overwhelmed by remorse for leaving Cecilia behind. Confronted with the harsh truth of his own failure, Yuga finally loses his composure and breaks down in tears. Yoki and Raven are forced to calm him before the conversation can continue. Once he regains himself, Yuga realizes how deeply he has wronged Mikana and acknowledges that she has always stood by Cecilia through every hardship and triumph in her life. He turns to Yoki and asks how he can possibly make amends. Yoki advises him to start with a sincere apology and to let Mikana scold him as much as she wants. He explains that being scolded is often a sign of genuine care, as those who reprimand you do so because they want you to grow and succeed. Observing Yuga's straightforward and somewhat childish nature, Yoki finds the suggestion oddly fitting. Determined, Yuga asks Yoki to accompany him to Mikana's home, so he can apologize properly. Yoki reluctantly agrees. Upon arriving, Yuga admits that he wants to go in alone, explaining that he only needed Yoki and Raven to escort him that far to ease his anxiety. Yuga marches inside, but immediately crosses a line by barging into Mikana's room while she is changing. The mistake nearly earns him an explosive reprimand. Yet he hastily explains himself, apologizing profusely for how he has treated her. In the end, he asks her to scold him, insisting that it is what he deserves most. Mikana obliges without holding back, berating him thoroughly, especially for his outrageous timing. With the situation resolved in its own chaotic way, Yoki quietly makes his escape, leaving Raven to deal with whatever aftermath remains. Later that day, Yoki finally decides to make his way to Cecilia's home, determined to put all distractions behind him. On the way, he encounters the Oracle once again. She opens her mouth to tell him that his fate has changed for the better because of the good deeds he performed, but Yoki interrupts her, dismissing her warnings as Oracle nonsense, and presses on towards Cecilia's house. As he continues, he runs into the young woman from the bakery. She asks if the muffins he bought from her brother earlier had turned out badly. Yoki confirms that they were indeed crushed, but admits that they still tasted fine. In an effort to make amends, she hands him a whole box of fresh muffins as an apology. Shortly afterward, he encounters the father of the child who collided with him earlier that day. The man apologizes for the trouble his child caused and gifts Yoki a packet of skewers. By the time Yoki reaches Cecilia's home, Happiness is there to greet him, scolding him lightly for being late. He apologizes, explaining that it had been a long and eventful day. Once inside, he is finally reunited with Cecilia, whose delight is evident. She receives the muffins and skewers with gratitude, then offers Yoki some tea she prepared herself. They share a hearty meal, during which Yoki recounts the past week without her and tells her how he has come to know all the remaining members of the hero party as well. Their pleasant conversation is suddenly interrupted by the arrival of the hero party. Mikana is the first to step forward and sincerely apologize to Cecilia for having abandoned her in front of the demon. Raven and Yuga also apologize, though Cecilia forgives them easily. She assures them that it was the best course of action at the time to defeat the demon lord and reflects on how difficult it must have been to face the enemy without a healer. Cecilia remembers how Mikana rushed to her aid after battle, leaving her with no reason to hold a grudge against anyone in the party. With apologies exchanged, the rift within the team is finally mended. Later, as the sun sets, Yoki is seen walking with Cecilia. She quietly deduces that it was likely Yoki who encouraged the party to apologize, helping restore harmony among them. At last, Yoki presents Cecilia with the necklace he had bought for her, and she treasures it deeply. Overwhelmed, Yoki feels almost surreal, while Cecilia reflects on how her life has grown a little brighter ever since this kind-hearted demon entered it. The 6th episode opens with Cecilia traveling by carriage to a remote village, accompanied by Sheik and Yoki. As the carriage rolls along the road, Sheik is barely able to contain his childlike excitement. Riding in a carriage has been a long-forgotten dream of his, one he never thought he would fulfill after becoming an enemy of humanity by siding with demons. Now, with his circumstances having changed so drastically, he openly marvels at the experience. Cecilia remains deeply grateful to both men for accompanying her, knowing she would need their assistance. Their destination is a village recently attacked by bandits. Although the attackers have already fled, they left behind numerous injured villagers in desperate need of medical attention. Providing such aid is part of Cecilia's duty, as she regularly travels from village to village tending to those who require immediate healing. Yoki, however, finds himself far less pleased with Sheik's presence. He had hoped this journey would give him time alone with Cecilia, an opportunity to deepen their bond, and perhaps spark a romantic moment. With Sheik now tagging along, those hopes are promptly crushed. Irritated, Yoki snaps that Sheik never should have come, insisting that he and Cecilia would have been more than enough for the task. Their petty argument is cut short when Cecilia suddenly begins coughing, overcome by motion sickness from the ride. Sheik reacts instantly, producing a secret medicine and giving it to her. The effects are immediate, relieving her discomfort at once. This decisive action gives Sheik the upper hand, and he calmly declares that he has more than proven his worth on this mission. With no counter-argument left, an annoyed Yoki is forced to concede defeat. Before long, the carriage arrives at the village. An elderly man greets them at the entrance and immediately recognizes Cecilia, though he is unfamiliar with her companions. Cecilia reassures him that both men are skilled healers and that their presence will greatly help the villagers. They are soon led to a building where the injured have been gathered for temporary medical refuge. To everyone's relief, there were no fatalities despite the severity of the bandit attack. Encouraged by this, the three throw themselves into their work, healing the wounded with enthusiasm. While assisting the villagers, Yoki catches sight of Cecilia tirelessly treating patient after patient. Watching her work so earnestly causes him to blush. To him, a hard-working Cecilia is unbearably adorable. However, his admiration quickly turns to concern when he realizes she is pushing herself too hard. Approaching her, he urges her to rest, but Cecilia, driven by her sense of duty, refuses to slow down or think about her own well-being. This stubbornness strikes a nerve with Yoki. Having already decided that Cecilia's health should come before anything else, he takes drastic action, using his magic. He knocks her unconscious and catches her in his arms. He calmly announces to the others that Cecilia is fine, she merely needs rest. The villagers provide them a room, where Cecilia sleeps for a while before waking up, fully aware of what Yoki has done. Furious, she scolds him, insisting that he had no right to act against her will. Yoki responds firmly, explaining that if she had continued overworking herself, she would have collapsed anyway, and the outcome would have been far more dangerous. Unable to argue with that logic, Cecilia falls silent, eventually blushing as she realizes just how much Yoki cares for her. When he adds that there is no need to worry because he and Sheik have already finished healing the remaining villagers, her relief and happiness grow even more apparent. Much to Yoki's embarrassment at her adorable reaction, a knock interrupts the moment as the elderly man enters the room, visibly relieved to see that Cecilia is safe. He then brings up another concern, a young girl named Teal, who also needs medical attention. She was not harmed by the bandits, but has been frail since birth, her condition never fully understood. Believing it best to seek help from capable healers, the elder asks them to see her. The trio soon visits Teal, and Sheik administers medicine that quickly improves her condition. Instead of thanking them directly, the girl clasps her hands in prayer and praises a god, convinced that her prayers are the reason her troubles are always resolved, and that these strangers were sent as an answer. Curious, Cecilia, Sheik, and Yoki ask her to show them this god. Teal leads them to a statue, where they are shocked to discover it depicts a demon. Teal suddenly begins coughing due to her weak health, prompting Cecilia to escort her back home, leaving Sheik and Yoki alone with the statue. At that moment, the gargoyle-like demon statue reveals itself to be alive. It unleashes a bolt of lightning straight at Yoki, who narrowly dodges the attack. Reacting instantly, Sheik launches a countermeasure, restraining the demon by locking its arm in place and preventing it from striking again. Yoki, however, expresses that he wants to speak with the demon alone and asks Sheik to release him. Sheik complies without hesitation. Once freed, the demon explains that he was originally created to protect the villagers. At some point in the past, he had been captured by bandits who intended to use him to attack the village. Instead, the demon acted according to his purpose and turned on the bandits, driving them away and safeguarding the people. Since that incident, the villagers have come to revere him, erecting a statue in his likeness and worshiping him as a deity. He also reveals that he was responsible for repelling the most recent bandit raid. Lately, however, only one person has continued to visit him regularly: Teal. This confirms Yoki's suspicions that the demon poses no threat to humans, and that his earlier attack was merely a reaction to what he believed were suspicious intruders. After hearing the full story, Yoki and Sheik decide to leave the demon be, allowing him to live freely, as he presents no danger to humanity. With the matter settled, Yoki finally gets a long-awaited opportunity to spend time alone with Cecilia. Seeing this as his chance for a romantic moment, he reassures her that the demon posing as a statue is nothing to worry about. He explains that, much like himself, the demon is misunderstood and actually spends his time protecting humans rather than harming them. Cecilia remains understandably skeptical, as a benevolent demon is an extremely rare occurrence. Still, her trust in Yoki leads her to accept his judgment. Their conversation is interrupted by a small, endearing mishap when Cecilia trips on her step. Yoki instinctively catches her, creating a brief but intimate moment. Both of them blush intensely, too flustered for the situation to develop into anything more romantic. Not long afterward, the village comes under attack once again by bandits. This time, however, Yoki and Sheik are present to defend it. Sheik takes the initiative, cutting down numerous bandits with impressive efficiency. Cecilia is visibly amazed by his performance, prompting Yoki to remark that there's a reason Sheik serves under him. His strength in combat is undeniable. Yoki soon joins the fray himself, skillfully overwhelming the bandits while effortlessly dodging their attacks. One bandit attempts to sneak up behind Cecilia, but his effort is futile. Yoki catches in the act and swiftly neutralizes the threat. The final wave of bandits is wiped out when Yoki unleashes his special ability, Hyperstorm, decisively ending the assault. In the aftermath, Yoki realizes that Sheik is nowhere to be found. It becomes clear that he chased some of the fleeing bandits into nearby forest. Concerned, Yoki and Cecilia head after him. Deep within the forest, they discover Sheik locked in combat and on the verge of defeat at the hands of a hero named Miller, who claims to be acting to protect the gargoyle demon. Miller is determined to eradicate both the bandits and the demon, showing no concern for whether the demon is truly benevolent. Teal is present as well and desperately pleads with him to spare the demon, but her words fail to sway him. Yoki steps forward to confront Miller, only for Cecilia to urgently warn him not to engage. She explains that Miller's sword has the ability to absorb mana, a dangerous matchup for Yoki, who relies entirely on mana-based combat. Miller demonstrates the sword's power with a swift long-range slash, severing one of the gargoyle demon's arms. Ignoring Cecilia's warning, Yoki launches his attack. Every spell and strike he unleashes is rendered ineffective, no matter how powerful. Miller openly acknowledges the sheer amount of mana Yoki possesses, admitting that Yoki would have easily won against almost anyone else. Unfortunately, that is not the case here, and Yoki's defeat appears inevitable. Refusing to give up, Yoki unleashes a relentless barrage of lightning, pouring continuous mana into the fight. At last, the sword reaches its limit and shatters. Yoki had known from the beginning that the weapon, being an object, could only absorb a finite amount of mana at any given time. With his nearly infinite mana reserves, Yoki proves to be the sword's worst possible opponent. With the weapon destroyed, Yoki closes the distance in an instant and delivers a devastating punch, sending the seemingly lightweight Miller flying backward and crashing into a tree. After his defeat becomes undeniable, Miller resorts to a reckless, desperate attack, clinging to the faint hope that sheer chance might somehow turn the battle in his favor. Yoki evades the strike effortlessly, scarcely needing to think about it. However, the attack continues past him, heading straight toward the already injured gargoyle demon. Before it can strike, Teal throws herself in front of the demon, shielding him with her own body. Though it makes little sense on the surface, a human protecting a demon, Teal's actions are driven by gratitude. She cannot bring herself to let the gargoyle, who had protected her and the village, die. Miller exploits the momentary confusion and launches yet another attack, this time aimed at Yoki's companions. Yoki manages to intercept and protect them, but the distraction gives Miller the opening he needs to flee. As he escapes, Yoki realizes he has grown careless and overconfident. He blames himself for the failure, and that self-reproach ignites a terrifying surge of rage. Consumed by fury, Yoki transforms into a far more dangerous demon form than the one he normally uses. Without hesitation, he takes to the air and pursues the wounded Miller. Catching up to him in moments, Yoki swiftly overwhelms and captures him. Despite his overwhelming desire to kill Miller on the spot, Yoki forces himself to rein in his anger. Instead of delivering a fatal blow, he hurls Miller into the water, sparing his life. Yoki then returns to the village, where Cecilia is waiting for him. With the danger finally over, Yoki uses his power to turn the gargoyle demon into a monk-like statue, ensuring his safety. The statue is brought back to Cecilia's home, along with Teal, who is now fully recovered thanks to Cecilia's healing. Cecilia's mother welcomes Teal into the household as a maid, though she struggles to accept the presence of an unsightly statue in her home. With that unresolved discomfort lingering in the air, the episode comes to a close. The 6th episode begins with Teal taking care of her Lord Guardian, just as she does every day. She continues to call him her guardian, even though he is, in reality, a gargoyle, because she deeply cherishes the protection he provides. The guardian statue is kept in Yoki's room, as Cecilia's mother did not take it in. While cleaning the statue, Teal begins to cough, prompting the guardian to remind her that she needs rest and does not have to come there every day. However, kind-hearted Teal does not take much care of her own health and holds cleaning the guardian statue in far higher regard. She then asks the guardian where Yoki is, to which he replies that Yoki and Cecilia have been invited to the castle by the king to receive an award for recently protecting Dagger's village from bandits. Meanwhile, Cecilia and Yoki are kneeling before the king. At first, the king speaks to them in an official, harsh tone, leading Yoki to think that all kind of kings in this world are quite rude and obsessed with power, whether they are demon kings or any other type of king. However, he is soon proven wrong when the king in front of him drops his formal guard, admits that such persona is exhausting, and shifts into a far more jolly personality. The king is clearly very pleased with what Cecilia and Yoki did in the village, and soon offers him a reward for their good deed. Cecilia, being kind-hearted and already wealthy, explains that she only did what she believed was right and therefore does not really need a reward. The king notes that he is aware of the hero Cecilia and had expected nothing less from her. He then turns toward Yoki and asks whether he requires anything as a prize. Yoki neither declines like an ordinary person nor directly accepts. Instead, he states that what he requires is something even the king himself cannot provide. This remark piques the king's curiosity while also rubbing his ego the wrong way. The king then asks what it could possibly be that someone as mighty as him cannot provide. He makes a few guesses, but all of them are wrong. In the end, Yoki dramatically announces that what he needs above all else is Cecilia's love. Only after the words leave his mouth does he realize that what he has done is quite embarrassing for both himself and Cecilia. The king laughs and concedes defeat, remarking that this truly is something even a king cannot provide. Later that day, Yoki goes straight to Cecilia's palace with her, where she obviously scolds him for the absolutely embarrassing statement he made in front of the king. Yoki does not have many good excuses and tries his best to apologize to make it up to Cecilia, but nothing seems to work until Cecilia's mother comes over and remarks that this is indeed a very big mistake and that Yoki needs to be punished. As punishment, he is told that he is not to meet Cecilia for about a month. Hearing this, Yoki is surprised and feels that this is far too cruel a punishment. Cecilia, who had been angry just moments before, also experiences a shift in emotions. She does not want to admit it, but she wants to see Yoki much more often. Reluctantly, she tells her mother that the punishment does not have to be this severe, as it seems Yoki has learned his lesson from the experience. Cecilia's mother reads her daughter instantly and concludes that a month of separation will be too long for Cecilia as well, since she also enjoys spending time with Yoki. However, she cannot let this behavior go unpunished. So in the end, Yoki is told to abstain from meeting Cecilia for 2 weeks. Happiness carries him out of the palace, and he soon returns home, where he finds a gargoyle statue along with Teal. After arriving home, he talks with both of them and decides to name the Lord Guardian Guy, reasoning that the name fits perfectly since he is a gargoyle after all. However, Teal says she will continue to call him Lord Guardian, just as she always has. Teal soon leaves, and Yoki lies on his bed to get some much-needed rest. He tells the gargoyle what happened at Cecilia's home. Since he made that huge blunder and cannot see Cecilia for 2 weeks, he decides he needs something to pass the time. He concludes that taking on some adventures to earn money is the best option and heads to the dean immediately. Meanwhile, Cecilia is drinking tea in the garden by herself. Without realizing it, she ends up pouring 2 cups of tea even though she has no company. She makes this mistake while thinking about having a conversation with Yoki. Her mother comes over and immediately spots the mistake. She reads her daughter easily and understands that the second cup is meant for Yoki, since he is clearly on Cecilia's mind. Despite knowing this, the mother chooses to tease her by asking who the second cup is for. Cecilia blushes and says it is for her mother, trying to cover the fact that she has Yoki in her thoughts. The mother accepts the tea, fully aware that her daughter is attempting to conceal something obvious to her. A few days later, Yoki returns home after a tough day of adventuring. He talks to the gargoyle, explaining that he is very excited because the 2 weeks of his punishment are nearly over. However, the gargoyle reveals a disturbing secret. He transforms into his normal shape and explains that the damage he sustained on the battlefield was worse than he initially thought. Cracks are beginning to appear all over his body, and he states that it will not be long before he reaches the end of his life for good. Yoki becomes furious, telling the gargoyle he should have said something earlier. The gargoyle believes it would not have made any difference. He has one final wish. He wants Yoki to protect Teal at all costs. Although Sheik may have healed her temporarily, she is still weak and could collapse at any time. He asks Yoki to promise to take care of Teal after he dies. Yoki responds that he will find a cure for both Teal and the gargoyle. Yoki first goes to Duke and asks him how the gargoyle can be cured, noting that there were many gargoyles in the demon's palace. Duke is surprisingly well educated on the matter and explains that feeding the gargoyle some magic will heal any dangerous injuries. Yoki is surprised to learn that the solution to his problem is so simple. He immediately rushes off to obtain some magic ore, only to find Cecilia running toward him in great haste. She informs him that something is wrong with Teal and takes him straight to the palace. Over there, Sheik is trying his best to keep Teal's condition stable, but is already at his wit's end. He explains to Yoki and Cecilia that to create a permanent cure, some evening grass will be required. Cecilia and Yoki decide to head to the commercial guild to gather this valuable item, since it cannot be found in ordinary shops. Before they can even leave, Cecilia's mother catches the two of them together. However, she is not angry in the slightest, as she understands that this concerns Teal's well-being, and under such circumstances she allows them to work together. They soon reach the shop only to discover that none of the materials they need are available. Fortunately, Clayman is also there and offers Yoki an adventure request in which he must take down a monster. This benefits him because the areas where these specific monsters are located usually contain magic or an evening grass nearby. Yoki and Cecilia accept the task, as it gives them a clear destination and even provides them with a free ride. Accompanying them on this trip are Clayman and Sophia herself. Sophia makes it clear that, as the head maid, she cannot remain idle while one of her maids is in such dire need of medical attention, and she feels a moral obligation to help with Teal's recovery. After successfully reaching the town, Sophia proposes that they will chase their target the next day, to which Yoki objects, questioning why they would not simply go ahead and defeat it now at sunset. Clayman makes it clear that the monster they are up against is no ordinary creature. He explains that it is the Rock Eater, a monster capable of absorbing attack magic. Not only that, but it also becomes significantly stronger at night, making it a formidable foe. He adds that going the next morning would allow more time for preparation and would mean facing a potentially weaker opponent. The next morning, they prepare to head out. Yoki and Cecilia are shocked to see Sophia setting out in the same maid outfit she usually wears. She explains that her husband loves seeing her in a maid outfit and that she would rather keep him happy than gain a few extra defense stats by wearing armor. It does not take long before they discover the cave and find the Rock Eater. They observe that it is literally eating magic, or like a snack when they encounter it. After realizing it is under attack by strangers, the Rock Eater grabs a huge rock and throws it at Yoki and Cecilia, both of whom manage to evade successfully. It then hurls another rock at Sophia, who also evades. Clayman creates several miniature soldiers that shatter the thrown rocks into small pieces, effectively ruining the power and accuracy of the attacks. Yoki uses lightning magic, only to discover that the creature can very effectively absorb that type of magic. However, he still uses magic strategically, casting Earth Rock to form a layer of rock around the Rock Eater to imprison its movements. Cecilia follows up with Saint Chain to further restrain it. Despite this, the monster breaks through the barriers with ease. Clayman then surrounds his wife with paper magic to send her inside the monster so she can take it down from within. To ensure she gets inside easily, Cecilia and Yoki trap the monster again, this time with Yoki using water magic to freeze the beast's legs with ice. In response, the Rock Eater releases many miniature versions of itself to attack the others, and these smaller creatures can also absorb magic. Yoki decides to handle them physically, essentially giving them the Mike Tyson treatment by punching them one at a time. Eventually, Sophia succeeds in taking down the Rock Eater from the inside and emerges safely. Clayman runs to her and hugs her, clearly worried about her well-being. Yoki and Cecilia watch the loving couple from a distance, fascinated by their affection for each other. After leaving the cave, Yoki proposes that they head out immediately because Teal and the gargoyle need help. However, Clayman suggests it would be safer to leave the next day since the road can be dangerous at night. Cecilia advises Yoki to back down and follow Clayman's suggestion for the moment. Later, when everyone is asleep, Yoki plans to go to Minerva alone to heal Teal and Guy. Cecilia is also awake and has already prepared the evening grass and magic ore for him. She anticipates that he will attempt to leave during the night and use his demon powers to fly to Minerva. He does exactly that and successfully heals both Teal and the gargoyle. He then flies back to the hotel, as he is keeping his demon identity, disguised from Sophia and Clayman. The next morning, he returns to the city asleep on Cecilia's lap. The 7th episode begins with 3 mysterious people standing on a rooftop, even though it is raining. They all have serious looks on their faces and appear to be plotting something significant. One of them is said to open an ominous-looking book that floats in the air and has a mysterious eye at its center, suggesting that they are about to carry out something major. The next day, Yoki is described as being out in the marketplace with a grumpy expression because he is not with Cecilia. Even though his punishment is now over, he reportedly still cannot meet her since she has been very busy lately. During his aimless walk, he meets Kramen and asks about his day. Kramen explains that he is still searching for something to buy his wife for their anniversary. Yoki is said to be amused that someone could be so lazy when the date has already passed, yet he decides to help by suggesting cat ears, thinking they would pair well with Sophia's maid outfit. Kramen firmly declines, stating that he considers the maid outfit perfect and believes any addition would make it imperfect. He also mentions that he has already bought something and will be heading back soon. An odd dress then catches Yoki's eye, and he is said to decide to try it on immediately. The dress looks impressive and makes Yoki's childish side feel like that of a true anti-hero. While wearing it, Yoki tells Kramen to send him on his next mission, as he claims to feel ready to take on anything. Kramen is said to take Yoki to the guild, so he can receive the new adventure tasks he so desperately craves. Since he is wearing his new cosplay outfit, the guild receptionist does not recognize him, and instead of simply revealing himself as Yoki, he announces himself as someone else entirely. He claims to be the hero magic swordsman of Black Lightning. For the time being, he himself is reportedly the only one who does not recognize how ridiculous both the name and the outfit seem. The receptionist announces that the currently available tasks are A-ranked or higher, and there are only 4 of them. Feeling psyched about getting something done, Yoki simply takes on all of them at once. First, he faces a dragon that appears more like a lizard with wings. The beast tries to attack him, but Yoki manages to dodge each blow before finally deciding to end the fight using lightning magic. After defeating the dragon, he delivers his heart to the person in need, who claims it will help with his daughter's recovery. Yoki reportedly begins gaining popularity as news spreads across the guild that he has taken down a dragon. Later that night, the hooded individuals are said to carry out an infiltration inside a store. They use their mysterious books to cast a spell on the guards, causing them to faint. The hooded people turn out to be quite young yet powerful kids. They get inside and strong-arm the manager into submission. Luckily for the workers, Yoki appears right then to save the day. He announces his ridiculous superhero name and claims it would be best for 3 culprits to surrender without harm. Unfortunately for Yoki, the thieves reportedly feel more embarrassed by his presence than threatened and end up fighting him, believing they can win. Yoki is said to attack first and takes out one of them with his yellow lightning. The second tries to get in close and use his scythe, but Yoki easily blocks the attack and uses lightning to finish him off as well. The final kid attempts to use the magic of the mysterious book, but Yoki manages to overpower it immediately and defeats him instantly. The manager of the place is reportedly grateful for Yoki's help, saying he can now deliver the Valentine's Day chocolate to its destination. Yoki is surprised to learn that this universe also celebrates Valentine's Day, despite seeming closer to the Dark Ages. Eventually, the official Night Authority arrives to investigate the commotion, among them Raven and Duke. Legally, they are said to be bound to capture Yoki since he is acting like a vigilante, and they do not know who is behind the mask. However, when he announces himself as a magic swordsman of Black Lightning, both Raven and Duke realize from his voice that it is none other than Yoki behind the mask. Yoki then makes his escape using a flashbang, and Raven reportedly orders his knights not to pursue, effectively aiding his escape. The knights proceed to clean up the remaining mess. Duke, however, is said to know his former captain quite well and continues searching the room, convinced Yoki has not left yet. He calls out Yoki's name and says he knows he is still there. The only thing Duke tells him is that he looks ridiculous in that costume and should consider returning to his normal clothes. Yoki reportedly cannot accept that possibility, as he believes he is dressed entirely in black with a very cool helmet. Nevertheless, he removes the helmet and finds himself facing a mirror that reflects exactly the ridiculous appearance Duke described. Only then does he realize how animated and foolish he looks, and he screams in agony upon realizing he has looked that way the entire day. The next day, Yoki receives a payment from the guild for taking down those 3 culprits. Out of curiosity, he asks Kramen who those 3 culprits were, and Kramen replies that they were B-ranked adventurers before discovering a strange book and giving in to their evil side. Meanwhile, Valentine's Day is fast approaching, and it is customary for girls to give chocolates to the people they love most. Teal, Happiness, Mikana, and Cecilia are all busy making chocolates and cookies for the person they love under Sophia's strict guidance. Mikana is the first to notice that Cecilia is making far too much for just one person, to which Cecilia replies that it is for all the orphans of the city. Mikana reminds her that Valentine's Day is meant for someone special and asks whether she already knows that. The question makes Cecilia blush because in reality, she is also making something special for Yoki, but does not want anyone to know about it. The first person to receive chocolates is Kramen, who gets them from his wife Sophia. He opens a box with great enthusiasm, and what comes out can only be considered sublime. He takes one piece of chocolate as if it were gold and puts it in his mouth, seemingly ascending into heaven itself. He declares that he has the best girl in the world and considers himself the luckiest man ever. Yoki, still not having received anything from Cecilia, feels down and looks at Kramen with absolute envy. Kramen looks into Yoki's eyes and makes it clear that he will not be getting any. Yoki runs out of guild, cursing Kramen and wishing that he would explode one day. The next person he goes to is Duke, only to find that another female knight wants to give Duke chocolates, forcing Yoki to let him go. Seeing Duke receive chocolates makes him even angrier. He leaves the knights and heads straight to Raven, only to catch him receiving chocolates from Happiness, which does nothing to ease his frustration. Finally, he goes to the marketplace, where he sees a line of girls wanting to give chocolates to Yuga, the hero, and this becomes by far the worst he has felt all day. He meets Mikana there and realizes that she is also there to give chocolates to Yuga. However, she is not very confident that he will like them since there are many girls bringing chocolates for him. Eventually, Yuga also happens to be there and comes over after noticing Yoki and Mikana. He explains that he is in disguise because he wants to receive chocolates from Mikana first. For him, Valentine's Day does not start until he tastes Mikana's chocolates. However, Mikana warns him that they did not turn out nearly as well as she had hoped. Yuga reassures her that he still wants them anyway. Reluctantly, the frail Mikana takes out one piece of chocolate, but what comes out of her box can only be described as a dark pit of void and certainly not chocolate. Yoki stands there in shock, wondering how someone could ruin something to this extent. Yuga, however, keeps his composure and bravely accepts the piece, even going so far as to eat it. It becomes clear why he is the human who killed the Demon King, as such valor would indeed be required to eat cooking this bad. Not only does he eat it, but he also thanks Mikana for it. Eventually, their cover is blown, and everyone realizes that it is the hero Yuga standing in the middle of the market. The girls all rush toward him to give him their gifts. After experiencing yet another setback, Yoki heads straight to Cecilia's home, hoping that he might receive something from her that she had perhaps forgotten. He is met with the grim realization that Cecilia is not at home. However, he finally receives chocolates, and the one to give them to him is Cecilia's mother. Initially, Yoki is determined to get chocolates only from Cecilia, but her mother raises a question of whether her gift is not good enough. Weighing his moral options, Yoki has no choice but to accept the gift. Out of seemingly nowhere, Duke breaks the bad news to Yoki, telling him that Envy has escaped from prison and is wreaking havoc in the town on a giant monster. Yuga is the first to confront them and asks why they are trying to ruin Valentine's Day. The three of them respond that a good-looking guy like Yuga could never understand the pain of people like them. They have not received chocolates from anyone, and if they cannot enjoy the day, they do not want anyone else to enjoy it either. They continue thrashing the town until Yoki finally arrives at the scene. He goes directly to them to talk instead of resorting to violence right away. Using what could be described as talk no jutsu, he sympathizes with them. He tells the three that he himself has not received any chocolates yet, but that does not mean he should ruin the day for others. In fact, he says, it is better to wait until the end of the day in hopes of receiving chocolates rather than destroying it. His persuasion is far from effective, and the battle inevitably begins. After exchanging many blows with them, Yoki comes out on top. The leader of the group turns out to be a girl who hates Valentine's Day because no one wanted chocolates from her, as she looks so much like a boy. Yuga consoles her, telling her that he will accept chocolates from anyone as long as they put their hearts and souls into making them. This comforts the young girl, but it angers Yoki, as Yuga ends up receiving all the credit for changing her heart. The calamity ends, and just before sunset, Yoki finally receives a package from Cecilia. Duke points out that everyone else also got cookies from her, which makes Yoki's heart sink. However, when he opens a gift, his heart flutters more than ever, for aside from the cookies themselves, there is also a cake that Cecilia made just for him. And just like that, a stressful day full of heartaches ends on a beautiful note for Yoki. The 8th episode opens with Yoki at the Adventurers Guild, where he speaks with Craven about securing his next job, so he can pay his rent. He reflects that, unlike the good old days with the Demon Lord, when his accommodation had been free, humans are far more cruel. Craven informs him that the newest available contract comes from the Merchants Guild, which is dealing with a theft problem at one of its locations. The assigned adventurer is expected to locate and capture thieves and, if possible, recover the stolen goods as well. Instead of concentrating on the mission itself, Yoki thinks only about how the task presents an opportunity to have a date with Cecilia at the shore, since that is where the thefts are occurring. Being the genius he considers himself to be, he accepts the assignment, only to discover that Cecilia's schedule is fully booked for the entire week, meaning he will need to take someone else's backup. He relays all of this to Happiness, whose only response is to call him an idiot. However, Yoki already has another scheme in mind. Rather than taking Cecilia, he decides to bring Raven and Happiness instead, hoping the trip will help the two grow closer. He meets Happiness at the rendezvous point, and Raven arrives shortly afterward. In private, Raven questions why Happiness is there, and Yoki explains that she is quite competent in battle and capable of taking care of herself. The hopeless romantic can think only about how he had not even known this about the woman he loves. Yoki reassures him that everything will be fine, adding that they have plenty of time ahead of them, assuming, of course, that he manages to impress her. After reaching their destination, the first thing Yoki does is leave the two of them alone, hoping that some love might blossom between them. However, Happiness takes the first step toward the investigation rather than romance, and begins speaking to a local in hopes of gathering information about the recent thefts. Unfortunately, her social skills are not as refined as those of the average third grader, forcing Raven to step in. True to his nature, he does not speak but instead writes down his questions. The man explains that the goods somehow get stolen even while he is on guard duty, and he has no idea how it happens. The sailors begin to suspect that the guards themselves might be the thieves, but he firmly pleads his innocence. They also claim that men of the sea do not lie and are therefore completely trustworthy. The innocent Happiness believes them, which results in a group of sailors gathering around her to praise her and introduce themselves. Meanwhile, Raven continues his investigation, questioning each of them in turn. Yoki then arrives at the scene, and Raven is the first to notice him and begins discussing the investigation. He informs Yoki that the entire fleet is always heavily guarded, yet cargo is somehow being stolen every night. Yoki finds it difficult to believe such an absurd possibility, but Raven maintains that the guards do not appear to be lying, as their story is quite convincing. He also mentions that one of the guards tells him about a mermaid singing every night when the cargo goes missing. At this point, Yoki becomes convinced that they are dealing with a mermaid. However, instead of treating the matter seriously, he grows excited at the thought of meeting one. Later that day, the three of them sit on a bench and eat a chill-like snack. Happiness buys an extra one for Raven and holds on to it until he arrives. Raven comments that the food is very sweet, but the grumpy Yoki remarks that the only sweet thing there is the interaction between Happiness and Raven. The romantic atmosphere is interrupted when Raven himself brings the focus back to business. He explains that someone in town has revealed that the sailors might be keeping a mermaid captive. This information sounds suspicious to Yoki, who believes that there may be more to the story than meets the eye. Raven states that sooner rather than later, the investigation is likely to lead them into a battle with demons, and he requests that Happiness remain behind while he continues investigating with Yoki. Happiness objects, prompting Raven to recount the story of a village that was reduced to ruins because of demons. He explains that there were many lives he failed to protect in that village, and urges her to stay back while he and Yoki proceed. However, this does little to change her mind. In fact, it has the opposite effect, as she takes a lead and moves ahead first to continue the investigation. Yoki can only reassure the romantically troubled Raven that Happiness will be alright and that there is nothing to worry about. Their investigation leads them to a tunnel connected to the sea, where they discover the stolen cargo as well. The opening is too small for boats to enter, leading them to conclude that a mermaid is most likely responsible. Before they can discuss the matter further, a beautiful mermaid emerges from the water and reveals herself. Her beauty is something that could captivate the average male gaze for days, but she does not waste time dealing with the uninvited guests. She begins singing directly in front of them, prompting the three heroes to cover their ears, not because her voice is unbearable, but because listening to her would put them to sleep. This effect applies even to Yoki, who is already quite overpowered. Happiness steps forward and uses her own singing to counter the mermaid's song, eventually overpowering it. The mermaid attempts to flee, but Yoki blocks her path while Raven places a sword in front of her, causing her to freeze. She declares that she does not care if she dies, but pleads with them to save her friend, who has been captured by humans. Raven, still burdened by trauma from past encounters with demons, refuses to believe her. Happiness steps in front of the mermaid to defend her and asks Raven to give her a second chance, but he remains unconvinced. Yoki then intervenes to calm the warrior, suggesting that it would not hurt to at least hear her out. Since Raven is outvoted, he eventually stands down. To lighten the mood, Yoki introduces himself in an overly childish manner, which Happiness finds strange. The mermaid introduces herself as Sheik. She explains how she and her friend ventured too close to humans and were captured. She says that she was ordered to keep stealing goods from a specific location under the threat that her friend would be killed if she refused. Yoki and Happiness believe her story, but Raven remains skeptical, although he appears resistant to feminine charm. He eventually gives in when Happiness holds his hands and asks him to trust the mermaid. Under reasonable pressure, Raven relents and agrees to pursue this new direction in their investigation. According to Raven's theory, if the sailors are truly behind everything, they will eventually come to retrieve the loot. In time, this theory proves correct. As the sailors arrive to collect the cargo that had been stolen by the mermaid, Raven is the first to confront them. The sailors immediately break into a sweat upon seeing the knight, standing so close to their hidden stash. Wearing clothes that clearly identify them as thieves does not help their case either. Raven grows enraged at the thought that they have framed an innocent mermaid. Not only have they committed a crime, but they have also deliberately misled the investigation to make her appear guilty. He takes them all on at once. One by one, the sailors fall to the knight's mighty sword. Yoki attempts to join the fight, but Happiness pushes him aside and takes the opportunity to demonstrate her wind magic, knocking the culprits down like bowling pins. Raven is surprised to witness that Happiness is more than capable of taking care of herself. After defeating the culprits, Raven searches them and discovers where they are holding the other mermaid captive. The three of them head to that location and find the mermaid completely naked. Fortunately, Happiness suddenly produces a towel to cover her and protect her modesty. They bring the rescued mermaid back to her friend Sheik, and the two reunite. Once again, the day is saved. The mermaids decide to sing for the three heroes in their beautiful voices, this time without putting them to sleep. Happiness joins in the singing as well, and eventually, it is time for the mermaids to depart. Before they leave, Raven approaches them and offers a heartfelt apology for not trusting them. Sheik accepts his apology and gives him a kiss as a gesture of thanks. This does not sit well with Happiness. Acting impulsively, she pushes Yoki aside so he cannot witness what happens and gives Raven a kiss as well, as if marking her territory. Poor Yoki, who had set them up in the first place, ends up being the only one who misses the moment. The 9th episode begins with Teal delivering an invitation letter to Yoki from Cecilia. Yoki expresses his gratitude to Teal for delivering the message even on her day off from Cecilia's place. He admits that he finds it hard to believe that she has come all this way solely for his sake. Teal responds that it is not a big issue, explaining that she also wants to meet the guardian deity. At that moment, Yoki realizes that she has come for her own reasons rather than for him. As soon as Yoki leaves his room, Teal's demeanor shifts from that of a shy girl to an excited admirer standing before the goblin statue. She shows the statue all the stones she has worked hard to buy so that he can eat them. From outside the room, Yoki hears her animated voice and remains astonished that she likes the statue to such an extreme extent. Afterward, Yoki heads straight to Cecilia's home, where he shares a refreshing tea with her. They engage in light conversation about how their day is going, and despite having already been rejected as a lover, Yoki cannot help but continue looking at Cecilia. During the discussion, he feels that a certain level of passion is lacking on her end, as she has not confessed her love in return. Not long after, Yoki leaves the mansion, still carrying the weight of his feelings. He senses that the meeting with Cecilia lacks closure, as though a certain form of love is missing from their interaction. Driven by unresolved emotions, Yoki decides to return to the house in stealth mode. Although he acknowledges that this behavior is wrong, he feels compelled to comply with his urges. He sneaks back in while completely invisible and observes Cecilia training intensely. He finds it surprising that she continues to train so hard even though the Demon King has already been defeated. To him, this demonstrates that there is still goodness left in the world and that she believes she must continue fighting to preserve it. Eventually, Yoki meets with his friend Duke. Although Duke has not had a lover since the show began, Yoki still finds himself relying on his advice for reasons he cannot fully explain. Yoki recounts everything that has happened that day, including the part where he stalks Cecilia inside her home. This revelation does not sit well with Duke, who is now a member of the military. After hearing the full story, Duke remarks that the only romantic counsel he can initially offer is to have Yoki arrested for illegally trespassing into someone's home. Yoki urges Duke to calm down, insisting that he is merely seeking love advice. Duke eventually relents and tells Yoki that he is not assertive enough in his love life. According to Duke, Yoki needs to steer his conversations with Cecilia into deeper territory, rather than keeping them at a shallow level. He warns that if Yoki fails to take this approach, he will remain trapped in the friend zone indefinitely. The conversation is eventually interrupted by Mikana, who happens to be passing by. Upon seeing her, Duke takes his leave, claiming that Mikana is a much better person to speak to about Cecilia. Raven also joins the discussion, having been brought there at Duke's request. Yoki immediately gets to the point and states that he wants to know more about Cecilia and the kind of person she is. Mikana feels inclined to help, as Yoki assists her with Yuga not too long ago. The first thing that comes to Mikana's mind is that Cecilia is integral to the group. She explains that without her, the heroes' party could never have functioned in the first place. From this, Yoki initially concludes that the group must have desperately needed a healer. However, Mikana quickly corrects him. She clarifies that Cecilia's contributions extend far beyond the realm of combat. Mikana explains that Cecilia also takes responsibility for managing Yuga's popularity with the girls whenever it becomes a hindrance to their primary task. In addition, Cecilia oversees the finances and handles all other logistical matters the group requires during their journey. It becomes evident that she is truly the core of the group, unlike Yuga, who is only effective at defeating demons. Despite this, Yoki feels that the conversation is not progressing in a direction that reveals anything deeper about Cecilia. At that point, Mikana inadvertently mentions that Cecilia once had a nickname that Yoki might want to know. However, Cecilia overhears this and immediately confronts Mikana, stating that she needs to borrow her. The two of them leave together, disappearing from the scene. Raven remains alone with Yoki and explains that he does not have the right to reveal Cecilia's nickname. Nevertheless, Raven decides to take Yoki to an orphanage where Cecilia has done a great deal of volunteer work. At the orphanage, the children refer to Raven as the cold-blooded swordsman, making it clear that this is his nickname. Shortly afterward, one of the children asks where the Holy Mother is, and Yoki immediately deduces that this must be Cecilia's nickname. On their way back from the orphanage, Yoki asks Raven why Cecilia is so shy about her nickname, as it seems to suit her nature perfectly. Raven responds that it is best for Yoki to discover the reason for himself, adding that there is a lifetime ahead for him to truly get to know Cecilia. Yoki agrees that this approach is the most appropriate way to understand her better. Raven then proposes that Yoki should consider going on a quest with Cecilia, just as he once does with Happiness, which helps him grow closer to her. He suggests that such an experience might similarly help Yoki strengthen his bond with Cecilia. Yoki finds this idea ideal and begins devising a plan to make it happen. The following day, Yoki waits eagerly to meet the love of his life, Cecilia, as they prepare to embark on an adventure together. He contemplates what he should do to impress her, but is abruptly brought back to reality by the grim presence of Mikana. Yoki immediately questions what she is doing there at that hour. Mikana explains that Raven instructs her to accompany Cecilia and Yoki on their adventure, as it may prove dangerous for just the two of them. She asks Yoki about the details of the quest, but he admits, implicitly through his uncertainty, that he has not given it much thought and is unclear about the specifics. All he knows is that the mission involves eliminating undead creatures from a location heavily plagued by them. His plan, as he conveys, is to take the lead and defeat as many of them as possible. Mikana criticizes this approach, telling him that he is being short-sighted and needs to devise a strategy that utilizes the entire team's capabilities. She suggests placing Cecilia in the lead, as laying the undead to rest is her specialty. Yoki eventually concedes to this plan. Shortly afterward, Cecilia arrives at the rendezvous point, bringing along another familiar face, Happiness. The four of them proceed to the site infested with the undead and enter an abandoned mansion, where they are unpleasantly greeted by their enemies. Cecilia takes the lead and eliminates the first batch using Holy Circle magic. When another wave appears, she handles them as well, this time with some assistance from Yoki. After these encounters, Yoki attempts to charm Cecilia by offering her water to stay hydrated, a well-timed gesture under life and death pressure. Eventually, they reach the final chamber, where the king of the undead awaits them upon his throne. Cecilia states that the undead king is not significantly stronger than his regular subordinates. Seeing this as the perfect opportunity to impress her, Yoki charges forward. Although the king attempts to retaliate with his sword, Yoki swiftly evades the strike and counters with a flying roundhouse kick that knocks the crown off the king's head. In an attempt to relieve the tension, Yoki mocks him, remarking that he is now nothing more than an ordinary skeleton. The king reacts less like a fearsome villain and more like a distressed child upon seeing his crown damaged, which unexpectedly earns him sympathy from the rest of the party. They criticize Yoki's behavior as brute and insensitive. The king resumes his attack, but Yoki disarms him by kicking his sword away, knowing how precious the crown is to him. The undead king then concedes defeat with honor, visibly distressed at the thought of being sent to the afterlife without his crown. Cecilia observes his sorrow and sympathizes with him, speculating that he may once have ruled a real nation, which would explain his deep attachment to the crown. Moved by mercy, Cecilia decides to use advanced magic to send the king to the afterlife along with his crown, so that he may find closure. However, after casting the spell, she becomes too weak to walk. Yoki instructs Happiness and Mikana to search the premises in case any undead remain, thereby creating an opportunity to attend to Cecilia alone. Seeing how weakened she is, he carries her to the carriage himself. Soon after, Mikana and Happiness rejoin them, and the group heads home. The next day, Yoki asks Cecilia why she dislikes her nickname, noting that it seems to suit her caring and sympathetic nature. Cecilia reveals that people call her mother, because Yuga once begins calling her mom due to the way she cooks and looks after the hero's party, not because of her empathy. This origin of the nickname causes her to resent it. Upon hearing the amusing backstory, even Yoki cannot maintain a straight face, and the day concludes on a lighthearted and humorous note. The 10th episode begins with Guy telling Yoki that he wants to start earning money somehow. Yoki is surprised at where this thought has come from, since Guy seems to be doing just fine as a statue at his home. Guy then explains that he feels extremely guilty about just sitting around waiting for Teal to bring in precious stones for him to eat. He says that he feels the need to repay Teal for her kindness, as she has a very weak body, and is working her very best to feed him. Yoki is impressed by Guy's determination and tells him that he will have no trouble finding work in the Adventurers Guild, and that all he needs is a disguise to cover his face. They both head to the Adventurers Guild in disguise. Yoki is disguised as the Black Swordsman, while Guy wears a disguise that hides his real face, although the disguise itself looks even scarier. The receptionist is reluctant to register Guy as an adventurer because of his frightening appearance, so she ends up calling Clayman. Clayman tries to act tough by claiming that he is busy, while in reality he is simply eating the lunch his wife made for him in the other room. Clayman wastes no time in giving Guy the permit, assuming that Yoki will take responsibility for his actions. However, there are no missions available in the guild for the time being, so they have no choice but to wait. Yoki takes this opportunity to show Guy around the city. Since Guy will now become a member of society, Yoki believes it is important that he gets as much exposure to the city as possible. The two of them move around the city while making small talk. Yoki tells Guy that he will need a weapon if he wants to work as an adventurer, although it is true that he can rely on his magic spells as well. Using them would risk exposing his identity as a demon. Guy completely understands Yoki's warning, and the two of them eventually head back to the guild in hopes of getting hired for some missions. However, when they return, Clayman informs Yoki that he has a guest waiting for him outside the building. Yoki finds it odd that he has a guest waiting for him outside the Adventurers Guild, but he sets aside his investigative instincts and heads outside, where a strange girl is waiting for him. As he gets closer, he realizes that it is the very familiar face of Cecilia. Since he is in disguise, he tries to play it cool and pretend that he does not know her, but it is already too late. Cecilia has already heard about the actions of the Black Swordsman, and the more she observes him, the more she begins to realize that this man is actually Yoki. He is unable to keep up the lie, and eventually gives in to Cecilia's intellect. Yoki and Guy then tell the whole story, and Cecilia is impressed to learn that Guy wants to make a living for himself rather than being a freeloader who eats off Teal. Cecilia tells them that she will be accompanying them on their adventures today, and the hopeless romantic Yoki has no objections to her proposal. Since Guy is a rookie adventurer, despite the power he possesses, he still ends up receiving basic missions that even a toddler could do on their day off. The first daunting task they receive from the guild is to retrieve a lost kitten for the person who posted the job. The three of them head to the owner's location, and Yoki is the first to attempt to ask the owner about the cat, so that they can have an easier time looking for it. However, his social skills do little to help them on their journey, and Cecilia has to take over the conversation. She demonstrates empathy and leadership toward the owner, and they happily give her all the information she needs to search for the cat. After receiving all the information, Yoki is the first to act on it in hopes of impressing Cecilia. He uses a superior sense of scent to begin searching, and quickly covers the ground by using lightning magic to boost his speed. He moves through every corner of the region, and soon finds the cat. The cat is reluctant to come into his arms, so Yoki uses magic that sends it into a deep slumber. Cecilia then tells Guy that after completing the mission, all that is left to do is inform the guild that it has been done so that they can receive their reward. Yoki, on the other hand, is laser-focused and excited about completing the next task at hand. Cecilia brings him back to reality, diffusing the excitement that had sent him over the moon. She tells Yoki that he is doing everything on his own, and that this way Guy will never learn how to navigate adventures by himself, which is the whole purpose of coming along with him in the first place. The second adventure involves gathering herbs. Yoki tells Guy not to end up gathering too many of them, since other adventurers are also on the lookout for herbs, because it is a very common task among newcomers. Guy wastes no time in gathering the right amount, and then verifies it with Yoki. Eventually, it is time for the third mission, and it is to take out a few goblins. Yoki senses that it will be the first time Guy uses a weapon that is not his own magic, so he might need some help. However, Guy uses his new weapon skillfully and demonstrates to everyone that he is more than capable of taking care of himself by taking out every goblin on his own. After completing the mission, they head back, and Guy receives his payment for the first time ever. He is pleased to be making a living on his own, but he requests from Yoki and Cecilia that he wishes to take on missions alone from now on. Naturally, Yoki and Cecilia are worried about his well-being, but Guy tells him not to worry, as he already has a good idea about how to take care of missions on his own. With that said, he heads on his merry way to take on life alone. Yoki is then left alone with Cecilia, and she tells him that she wants to spend some time with him. Yoki tells her that he will be going on an A-rank mission, and Cecilia has no problem going along with him. Yoki begins to tremble at the thought of going on a mission for days alone with Cecilia. He starts to picture it more as a vacation than a journey, but Cecilia is adamant about going with him even if it takes days. She changes into a new disguise and gathers the things that will be required for survival on their journey, which might take several days. She even creates a new alias for herself, going by the name of Cecily, during their journey. Cecilia tells Yoki that the mission is not only far away, but there are also no villages or stops in between. The road is quite terrible as well, so it is going to be very taxing on the body. They also discuss the nature of the mission. The person who hires them is an archaeologist, and the mission is not about destroying monsters, as most A-rank missions usually are. Instead, the two adventurers are supposed to investigate a ruin in depth and examine all of its contents as well. Yoki tells her that he will take out any monster that gets in their way. However, Cecilia is against this idea, as a battle inside the ruins could damage them and make their investigation less effective. Yoki completely understands and tells her that he will handle his magic accordingly. Eventually, Cecilia becomes tired and tells Yoki to set up camp so they can rest, as it is almost nighttime. The naive Yoki finds it hard to believe that he will be camping alone with Cecilia in the forest as he goes out into the woods looking for edible fruits. He takes deep breaths and calms himself down before finally finding the motivation to make sure the night goes as smoothly as possible. He gathers fruits in ample quantity and brings them back to Cecilia. Not only that, but he also sets up a perimeter using his magic, ensuring that both of them remain safe at all times. Cecilia then tells Yoki to take off his mask since no one is watching. She very obviously wants to see his face instead of it being hidden behind a mask, especially while having dinner with him. However, the shy Yoki is unable to do it in front of the girl he loves and tries his best not to comply. The adamant Cecilia takes it upon herself to remove the mask, since it is bad manners to keep it on during dinner. Yoki eventually gives in, and Cecilia serves him soup, which he drinks cheerfully while telling her that her cooking is truly second to none. After the meal, Yoki wants to go to bed, but Cecilia stops him, clearly wanting to spend more time talking with him. However, Yoki fails to get the hint, and Cecilia is too shy to openly ask him to stay, and talk of it has to be forced. As a result, the two of them end up going to sleep after a little while. During the night, Cecilia stays awake longer than the carefree Yoki. She ruminates on a troubling memory in which she is brought before the king, who informs her that a powerful neighboring prince has requested her hand in marriage. She tells the king that she is not ready for such a responsibility, but the king explains that the prince is a powerful person who will not consider that a valid reason for refusing the marriage. It becomes obvious that Cecilia is considering the political repercussions of going against the proposal. If it were only a matter of her personal preference, she would leave no stone unturned in destroying the marriage completely. The next day, they reach the ruins they are meant to explore. Cecilia thinks that she should be the one to investigate and take the lead, so that when they come across monsters, she can attain them rather than using aggressive magic that might damage the surroundings they are meant to investigate. However, Yoki does not accept this. He tells her that there are certain spells he can use to take care of monsters while preserving the surroundings. He simply has not revealed them yet, so he ends up taking the lead. They eventually come across some enemies, and Yoki uses a spell known as Illusion Spear. The spell captivates the enemies by showing them things they love very much, distracting them from their opponents. Afterward, they continue their exploration and eventually come out the other end, with Cecilia carefully taking notes about everything they observe. They then head back to Clayman, who is pleased to receive such a thorough compilation of the investigation and ends up giving the two of them a generous payment for their work. The 11th episode begins with Duke, Yoki, and Raven meeting at a small cafe, where the three of them discuss their difficulty in finding ways to spend more time with their respective lovers. Yoki proposes a plan in which they embark on an adventure and bring Cecilia and Happiness along, thereby creating an excuse to spend time together. The plan essentially turns into a date disguised as an adventure. Duke questions why they cannot simply ask their lovers out on a date like normal people, and this idea strikes Yoki and Raven as surprisingly revolutionary, as it had never occurred to them before. Duke internally questions the level of incompetence of his seniors, noting that they are unable to perform something as simple as asking the women they love out on a date. It is noted that Duke himself has begun to develop feelings for Irene from his workplace, and the three of them collectively decide to go on a triple date. They do not struggle to choose a destination, as Happiness already has a specific place in mind. She expresses her desire to visit a newly inaugurated site, where the king has unveiled a statue of the four heroes to commemorate the defeat of the Demon King. Upon realizing the chosen location, Cecilia and Raven become concerned. Raven attempts to persuade Happiness to consider alternatives, such as getting lunch or engaging in another activity, but she remains adamant about visiting the site. Eventually, Cecilia and Raven address the issue more directly, explaining that the area will be crowded with humans, and that the presence of two of the heroes who defeated the Demon King could lead to chaos. Despite their concerns, Happiness refuses to change her mind, and they ultimately proceed to the location. At the site, Happiness admires the statue of the four heroes, focusing particularly on Raven, the individual she is gradually falling in love with as time passes. Raven notices that her attention is fixed on a statue and becomes slightly shy. However, Happiness encourages him, telling him that he should take pride in who he is. Later, all six of them sit down to eat, during which Raven and Happiness share a quiet and intimate moment. This moment is interrupted by the sudden arrival of the vice captain of the Knights, who appears alongside several rookies on patrol. The situation worsens when it becomes apparent that he has overheard Raven speaking for the first time. Acting in a typically abrasive manner, he immediately mocks Raven for his girlish voice. Happiness observes this and stands up for Raven, but her intervention does little to improve the situation, as the knight proceeds to mock Raven further for being unable to defend himself and relying on a girl to do so. After delivering his insults, the knight leaves with his group, leaving Raven humiliated, especially considering that he outranks the one who insulted him. Overcome with frustration, Raven walks away from the group, clearly needing time alone. Yoki and Duke follow him in an attempt to bring him back. They find Raven sitting alone and try to lift his spirits, but he remains deeply upset and begins to view himself as weak. Duke adopts a harsher stance, expressing that he finds it pathetic that they must go after Raven in the first place, and he leaves the matter to Yoki. Yoki then makes a sincere effort to comfort Raven, sharing his own struggles by explaining that he too finds going on dates difficult. He recounts how, during his last outing with Cecilia, he wore a mask for the entire journey due to his shyness. This admission manages to cheer Raven up and gives him a renewed sense of hope for change. With Yoki's support, Raven returns to group and they continue their date. A few days later, Cecilia contacts Yoki and the others in a highly distressed state to inform them of urgent news. It is revealed that Happiness has disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a note that Cecilia cannot understand. Cecilia explains that she had sensed something unusual due to Happiness frequently requesting leave, but she never anticipated that she would vanish entirely. Yoki examines a note and realizes that it is written in fragments, similar to the way Happiness speaks. Having known her for a long time, he is able to interpret its meaning, which indicates that Happiness wishes to meet Yoki, Duke, and Sheik in a private location. The three of them go to the specified meeting spot and learn that Happiness intends to take her relationship with Raven further. She expresses that she can no longer continue living under the facade of being human and wishes to reveal the truth to Raven, that she is, in fact, a demon. However, she acknowledges the significant risks involved, including the possibility that Raven may not accept her and could come to resent her. There is also the risk that such a revelation could trigger an investigation into Yoki, Duke, and Sheik due to their close association with her. Duke advises her to reconsider, warning that this single decision could expose all their secrets. Nevertheless, he ultimately places his trust in her judgment, recognizing her as a smart and mature individual. Yoki is also shown to trust Happiness to make the right decision, and he leaves the matter entirely in her hands. Later that day, just as the sun is about to set, Raven encounters the same rude knights once again. This time, however, he refuses to tolerate any disrespect. He firmly commands them, as their superior, not to address him by his first name, emphasizing that he outranks them all. He delivers this statement confidently in his own voice, without relying on pen and paper. Although his voice sounds frail to them, the resolve behind his words is anything but weak. The knights are visibly intimidated and immediately kneel before the infuriated Raven, showing him the respect he is due. A month passes, and Yoki visits Cecilia at her home, where they share tea. During their conversation, he mentions that the time has come for Happiness to reveal her true identity to Raven, and he admits that he feels anxious about how the situation will unfold. He soon leaves in search of Raven, intending to learn how things turned out. After his departure, Cecilia's mother approaches her and inquires about her marriage proposal. Cecilia responds that she plans to meet the potential suitor at the king's request, but intends to reject the proposal. Her mother then asks whether she has informed Yoki about this decision, to which Cecilia replies that she has not. Her mother concludes that Cecilia has withheld this information because she is feeling for Yoki, reasoning that otherwise he would already be aware. Cecilia outwardly denies this claim, yet she internally acknowledges that there is truth to it. Meanwhile, Yoki eventually finds Raven, who appears visibly angry, surrounded by a red aura that reflects his heightened emotional state. Raven does not speak, and instead hands Yoki one of his feathers. From this, Yoki understands that Happiness's true identity has been revealed. Raven's demeanor makes it clear that he is not in a celebratory mood, as he leads Yoki to an isolated place and draws his sword. Yoki assumes that Raven has failed to accept Happiness's true form, and a battle between them begins. Raven strikes first with his sword, but Yoki skillfully parries the attack. Yoki counters with a punch, which Raven blocks. Raven then creates distance and launches a long-range aerial slash that causes minimal damage. Yoki attempts to restrain him using hearth magic, but this proves ineffective. He realizes that Raven has grown significantly stronger. The battle escalates until Yoki ultimately transforms into his demon form and concludes the fight with his powerful attack, Endless Darkness. After subduing Raven, he demands an explanation regarding what transpired between him and Happiness. Raven then reveals that Yoki had once plucked all of Happiness's feathers in order to disguise her as a human, an act that caused her considerable pain. As a result, she sent Raven to confront Yoki. Yoki is stunned by this revelation, realizing that he had completely misunderstood the situation. He had believed that Raven rejected Happiness, when in fact the opposite is true. Recognizing his mistake, Yoki acknowledges the truth, and the three of them end up apologizing. He then asks how Happiness's confession to Raven unfolded. Raven explains that Duke had guided him into the middle of the forest before leaving him alone, stating that happiness would handle the rest. There, Raven encountered a beautiful tree, and as he approached it, happiness appeared before him with her wings fully revealed. She confessed her love to him, expressing that she never wanted their time together to end. Without hesitation, Raven accepted her feelings wholeheartedly and embraced her warmly. Upon hearing this, Yoki reacts with overwhelming delight at how sweet the moment turned out to be. However, as punishment for not informing him directly, he chains the two of them together and creates a barrier around them, forcing them to find their own way out. Yoki then returns to Cecilia to inform her of how Happiness's confession unfolded, and she expresses her happiness upon hearing that everything went well. Soon after, Raven and Happiness burst in, seeking playful revenge on Yoki for trapping them. Yoki immediately jumps out of Cecilia's home, with the two new lovers chasing after him in high spirits, both grateful and eager to get back at him. The 12th episode begins with a swarm of girls attacking Yugi with lots of affection, and he seems to be enjoying it. However, Yoki knows that they need to do a quest together, and that it is no time to be messing around. So, he grabs the hero Yuga and dashes the carriage as fast as he can. After getting in, he tells the driver to get a move on and head to their destination for today's adventure. While inside, Yoki throws a tantrum at the hero, saying that his popularity with women makes him a liability during adventures. However, Yuga couldn't care less, as he enjoys his popularity with all the females. Yoki is left speechless as they head toward their adventure. Meanwhile, Cecilia gets ready in front of her two maids, who help her and advise her on what to wear. She is about to meet her potential suitor, which means she has to be on her best behavior and look as good as she can, even if she plans on rejecting the proposal. As she is busy preparing, Teal comes into the room and informs Cecilia that a friend is waiting for her in the living room. Cecilia wastes no time and heads straight there, where she discovers that it is one of her old friends, Mikana. Mikana is surprised to see Cecilia in a beautiful dress, as she rarely dresses like the noble she is. Cecilia tells Mikana the reason for her unique attire, explaining that she is about to meet a potential suitor under command of the king himself. Mikana's jaw drops at this realization, as she cannot fathom a fellow hero getting married so quickly. Cecilia immediately follows up by confirming that she has every intention of turning down the proposal, as she is focused on her training and cannot get married right now. Mikana then asks who the person interested in Cecilia is. Cecilia reveals that it is a hero from the Kingdom Duchy of Luminaria named Soleil Graceheart. Mikana knows him very well and becomes concerned, as he is not someone who takes no for an answer. Eventually, the day arrives, and Soleil Graceheart meets the anxious Cecilia in her garden. They have tea together and engage in small talk. As Cecilia begins to feel more at ease while speaking with him, he finally addresses the matter at hand. He asks for Cecilia's hand in marriage in a manner that makes rejecting the offer feel almost impossible. He explains that time and again humans have proven to be at war with one another, and by marrying her, it would unite two kingdoms, effectively reducing the chances of war between them to zero. It would also show the world that the two kingdoms are united, making others think twice before challenging them, no matter how strong they are. This places Cecilia in a very difficult position, as she feels she's being rushed into a marriage she does not approve of. Sensing this, Soleil eases the situation by saying that she does not have to give an immediate answer. He suggests that she take time to think it over, but expresses his desire to go out with her and explore the streets of her kingdom, so that he can better understand her people, believing that understanding different people is key to preventing conflict. Meanwhile, Yuga and Yoki reach the site of their adventure task and are amused by what they see. It has been reported that a mining team discovered a monster nest while mining. While that is technically true, the monsters are so cute, harmless, and friendly that it feels wrong to harm them. The miners request a way to safely deal with them so they can continue their work. Yoki and Yuga have no idea how to handle a situation where the monsters are too cute to be killed, so they retreat for the time being and plan to come up with something overnight. As Yoki and Yuga sit together, Yuga brings up something he needs advice on. Yoki, being a supportive friend, is ready to offer his wisdom whenever needed. However, what follows causes Yoki's heart to sink into a deeper despair than any enemy ever could. Yuga reveals that a man named Soleil has shown interest in Cecilia and plans to marry her, and above all else, he wants her to decline the offer. However, Yoki does not listen to a single word. He soon gets up, says that Yuga will have to take care of the mission himself, and leaves. As Yoki runs back toward the kingdom, his heart is weighed down by a feeling of betrayal. The only thing he can think about in his agony is why Cecilia did not inform him about a potential suitor who is clearly very interested in her. Negative thoughts about losing Cecilia plague his mind, and in his desperation, he awakens his demon powers. His wings appear, and his ominous horn takes form as well. He takes flight and heads towards Cecilia in the kingdom as fast as he can. Meanwhile, Cecilia spends time with Soleil Graceheart at his request, as he wants to get to know the people of Minerva. The first place they head together is an orphanage, where Cecilia regularly donates. The two of them bring cookies to the children, And as usual, the kids are delighted to see their holy mother. One of the children asks Cecilia who Soleil is, and he humbly tells them that he is merely a helper of Cecilia. He could have taken the opportunity to present himself as a hero from another nation, but it is clear that he wants to impress Cecilia as much as possible in order to marry her. One of the children asks Soleil to pick him up and hold him in the air. Soleil is taken aback by this request, as he does not spend much time with children. Eventually, he decides to lift the child in his arms. However, all the other children then want to be lifted as well after seeing this. Cecilia jokingly tells him that it is time for him to take turns lifting all of them. After spending a good amount of time at the orphanage, they head back into the carriage, where they continue their conversation. Soleil tells Cecilia that he did not know that ordinary children spend so much time playing. In his childhood, all he remembers is practicing swordsmanship and learning as much as possible. Even during the conversation, Cecilia finds herself drifting toward thoughts of Yoki. She mentions that there is someone she looks up to and hopes to stand beside one day. Soleil senses that this person could be someone Cecilia loves, given the expression she has while speaking about him, but he says nothing. Instead, he mentions that there is also someone he looks up to, and he wants to do his best to live up to that person's expectations. Eventually, Cecilia drops Soleil off at the place where he is staying in the kingdom and heads home in her carriage. Before she leaves, Soleil expresses his wish to spend more time with her like this the next day, and she agrees. However, when she returns to her palace, the only person she can think about is Yoki. Deep down, Cecilia feels as though she is betraying his trust. The truth is that she wants to reject Soleil's proposal and distance herself from him, but he is making it very difficult for her to say no. Meanwhile, Yoki reaches the borders of the kingdom of Minerva, and his long and exhausting flight is about to come to an end. He has no time to hide his wings, so he decides to make himself invisible and head straight towards Cecilia. Before he can disappear, a long-range blue flame is launched at him, which he manages to evade. However, his trajectory is disrupted, and he crash lands on the kingdom wall. The man who attacks him introduces himself as the Beast of Blue Fire. They engage in a brief clash, but Yoki remains focused on reaching Cecilia rather than getting distracted by unnecessary fights. Soon, the official guards arrive at the top of the wall to confront Yoki, realizing that the situation is escalating into a major conflict. Yoki decides to retreat and plans to enter the kingdom the next day instead. However, things take a turn for the worse when Yoki receives a message from Kramen stating that he is now a wanted man in Minerva for an unknown crime. The next day, Duke and Raven, as members of the kingdom's official guard, are informed about the demon attack from the previous night, and they increase security along the boundaries of the wall. People entering the kingdom are closely monitored. Among them is Yoki, who enters disguised under a hood. Cecilia and Soleil also happen to be present there. Cecilia notices that Yoki is injured and attempts to rush toward him, but Soleil stops her. She frees herself, saying that she knows Yoki, and hurries toward him in a way that reflects deep personal concern. Cecilia immediately heals Yoki's wounds, while Soleil watches the scene with a hint of jealousy as he approaches them. After introducing himself, Soleil makes it clear that he intends to become Cecilia's fiancé, subtly asserting his position over Yoki. Yoki remains composed and states that Cecilia is merely a friend who has helped him on many adventures, and that their relationship is nothing special, though Soleil does not believe this. Their conversation is cut short when Raven and Duke apprehend Yoki, as he is currently wanted for a crime he did not commit.